Hello and good morning at us Electronica 2021. It's already Saturday, so the festival is slowly going towards its end, but today we have a lot of really interesting programs. One of this is this symposium conference that we are starting right now, a part of the AI Lab, the European Artificial Intelligence Lab, a program that is co-founded by the Creative Europe program, and we also get gracious support from the Austrian Ministry for Culture for this program. But of course, the much more important contribution to this program is all the many partner institutions that are collaborating with us, and the wonderful artists. You don't see them yet, but I have some of them in front of me that are participating in this project, that then will also participate in the sessions and talk about their work, talk about their experience, experience that we also collected in a wonderful book that we have been able to publish just right for the beginning of the festival. It's called The Practice of AI and Art, and it's not just a wonderful compendium of many, many interesting projects that are conducted all over Europe in this context, but it's really also a summary of experiences. Connecting AI and art is one way not so new, because it's, one could say, just another step in connecting art and technology, art and science. But of course, AI has become the keyword, the buzzword of our time. It's almost synonymous for this whole entire complex of thinking about how new, in particular, digital technology is changing our world, is changing our society, our culture, and all these kind of things. How can we deal with it? How can we utilize the tools that are almost like every day new, really exciting tools are popping up? And we have a very interesting tendency. Also, the development of AI seems to be totally in the hands of a few commercial companies. At the moment, there is still a very strong trend also to make new algorithms publicly available. And many, many artists or cultural artistic institutions and labs worldwide have been able to really get their hands on really interesting new possibilities, or even, of course, create their own or build upon research projects and extend it into experiments for creative applications. And this whole questions of creativity, what does it mean when suddenly you have such powerful tools? Is this still creation when maybe, like we had yesterday, a wonderful concert by Nikrang? Who is the composer? Is it really the AI? Is it, I mean, you know, all these things. I mean, I'm sure in this conference we are mainly talking to people who are experts in this field. And since we're anyway running a little bit late, I'm again saying thank you for all the partners, in particular the artists, and I wish you a lot of inspirations and maybe also hot discussions around this topic. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's Olga Sismanidi. As technology is a logical appeal to the evolution of life, the European Artificial Intelligence Lab works. The Creative Europe program supports the disciplinary projects to generate value through different interactions. This type of projects show us the opportunity to pursue ambitious goals towards global challenges through creativity, rather unusual allies by opening up to the new for making the human life better. From the European Digital Arts and Science Network, the predecessor of the EU AI Lab, both co-financed by Creative Europe, Ars Electronica, together with 14 European organizations, show us how interdisciplinarity, cultural exchange, and mobility can be fostered and result into new digital arts, creative works, prototypes, and research inspired by AI beyond technology. The resulting projects show us the added value of connecting digital arts and science with other fields ranging from neuroscience, biointelligence, media, astronomy, through to employment, health, environment, and other sensitive fields such as data, digital privacy, democracy, and even world dominance. It is very exciting, or at least I am, about the opportunities offered by technology and social innovation for the CCIs. We need to understand, though, what these intelligent technologies are, the current momentum of NFTs or deepfakes, or the capabilities of algorithms in different layers, from crypto and blockchain to smart contracts, you name it. The EU AI Lab show us new creative expressions and the ever-evolving aesthetics of digital arts, the design and use of digital experience beyond entertainment, the changing relationship between machines and the humans, and insight to the human perception on generative art, literature, and music, which involves different roles. In this sense, we are experiencing the changing notions of authenticity, originality, creativity, and authorship, from human exceptionality to the intelligence demonstrated by the machines that challenge our own abilities within the context of an inclusive, diverse, transparent digital ecosystem. And of course, it comes down to AI as a global term, machine learning, data governance, trustworthiness, and human-centric evolution. We have legal certainty with the GDPR, other regulatory proposals for the AI, the Data Act, political priorities such as the Green Deal and the European Bauhaus, and the triangle fostered by the EU funding on creativity, research and innovation. However, everything is on the Article 2 of the treaty, which provides the opportunity to frame these values in a more systematic manner to create solutions towards the global challenges, and by doing so to hopefully experience the European sustainable renaissance, which can be exported, which can attract investment and can add to the flourishing of the daily life in Europe. Having said all this, the EU AI Lab show us the path with many examples that even during the pandemic, we have seen new hybrid exhibition formats at the global gardens, which confirm that creativity and innovation are unlimited. And who is better to tackle this rather than a global, diverse community? I will leave you with this. I wish you the very best for the conference. Thank you very much for having me, and see you soon. Bye.
Well, after this nice welcome words and introduction to the European dimension of the topics of this conference and this program, it's now the pleasure finally to give the floor to the artists, and please enlighten us with your interesting concepts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel about the question of autonomy and human intention in art and AI. Actually, this is the second part of the panel that was created as a collaboration between Ars Electronica Festival in Linz, Austria, and Mutek Montréal Festival in Canada. My name is Nikrang. I will be moderating the panel. I am an AI researcher and artist myself, working at Ars Electronica Future Lab, interested mainly in musical applications of AI. In the first part, we discuss some of the, I think, most important aspects of AI creativity that not have been given so much attention yet, which are the question of human intention in a creative process with AI, and also the question of AI autonomy in a creative process with humans. So we will be continuing this discussion today. I am pleased to be joined by three panelists, three artists from different backgrounds to continue this discussion. I would say we start with an introduction round, We have some presentations prepared, and yeah, I would say we start with you, Davide, with your presentation. Is okay?
Sure. I'm not quite sure if I can actually use this, maybe.
Or, no, is it right order? Because, sorry, I have to ask that. Davide's presentation is the first one, right?
Anyway, meanwhile, I can improvise a little bit and have a little chat, and then when this is ready, you let me know. But yeah, my name is Davide Quayola. I'm well, I would say visual artist in the sense that most of my work relates in a way or another to visual arts, but also somehow branches in different directions, I would say. And the relationship with technology is certainly very important aspect of what I do, not only because of my relationship with technology, now I create work, but I would say also as a topic of what I discuss. It's like, what is our relationship with technology? How does technology changes the way we experience the world? I'm very fascinated about this idea of gazing machines, of how machines see the world, and how is this different from us. And I do this, again, not really with a sort of scientific or academic sort of objective, but rather as artistic speculations. I'm interested in taking perhaps sometimes autonomous vehicles to paint a new form of landscape, for example. So there's really a kind of connection between my work and, let's say, past, present, and future. So heritage and my exploration of heritage, it is my, say, personal way of ultimately exploring what the future might hold. It's like looking back at some of our traditions. Landscape painting, as I was saying, I think it's one of these traditions, something that I explored extensively in my work, the tradition of representing nature, and somehow go back to these traditions with very different technological apparatuses, or in a similar sense, looking at classical sculptures and what does it mean to perhaps the idea of human craftsmanship today and working with robotics. Ah, okay, maybe something, it's here actually. So, one of these topics that I've been exploring, and I guess very much related to where I'm from, as being Italian and growing up in Rome and studying fine art as a kid, the idea of looking back at these historical narratives, these iconographical narratives with very different pair of eyes. So started doing this kind of computational analysis of paintings and somehow reverse engineer objects that might be potentially remind you of some kind of preparatory drawings, but are essentially somehow reverse engineered from the original. These are some engravings on aluminium or some perhaps prints. And I think sometimes these objects are also installed in ways that remind you of these traditional museums. So their ultimate physical manifestation of the work is very important for me. So really, the relationship between physical and digital also, it's another, I think, important topic on what I do. And these processes seamlessly become physical and digital at the same time. And as I was saying before, this idea of sculptures, actually I am very obsessed with unfinished sculptures. These sort of old sculptures from the Renaissance that were left unfinished and somehow document a process. They're not anymore about what they were meant to be about. They are about articulation of matter itself. So I started experimenting with this idea of articulating matter and sculpting through these digital means, simulating material removal computationally, and then using robotics to actually then implement this material removal. And again, not with the objective of recreating classical sculptures, but rather to discover these sort of new processes and new aesthetics as a result of this. So my object really embed this kind of process in a way. They document the history of their creation somehow. This was actually with Ars Electronica also in Berlin at some point. And again, maybe I go back a little bit to this landscape painting because I started my presentation, but the other way around, I didn't remember this was the order. But I think this image I'm showing here, I think somehow sums up a little bit this kind of relationships I'm trying to make, putting myself in the shoes of these historical artists and this idea of en plein air painters that go out there and confront themselves with nature. But again, I do that with very different pair of eyes and process data using type of very large data sets to somehow recreate new landscapes that again then become again very physical that you can contemplate and see. I wanted to show you something else, and I think I will close it. Maybe I'm already like drifting a little bit longer than I should, but this I think relates maybe a lot with what we are discussing today, or a little bit with what you do also, Ali. But sound as well has been also another important topic for me, and this is a project that I'm presenting here at Ars Electronica this year. It's a concert for 2 motorized pianos and 2, well, humans that interact with the systems, and what comes out is really the results of this experimental interaction between really man and machine. And these 2 pianos are, again, motorized and are controlled digitally by our interaction with these algorithms that we design to perform the music. And the sort of paintings and these kind of pictorial simulations happen in the back, simultaneously synced on the very same algorithms that are governing the music. And maybe this I could
Thank you very much.
Pass the mic, well, the remote.
Thank you very much. I was in this performance, so it's a really unique experience, how you use painting and combine it with music. At the end of this panel, by the way, we will also show some examples from the artists, video examples from the artists that are here. And if you didn't have the chance to participate at the real performance, you could have a look at the video at the end of the panel here. So I would say we continue with you, Paola.
Yes. Well, I think my origins are similar. I also have a fine arts background. I was originally a painter. I think I still am, but I'm painting with other media, I suppose. I'm not going to talk about the whole of my art practice because it might be a bit too broad, but I want to talk about the portion that is related to artificial intelligence, no? And there is a branch of my work that is related to textile, and I think that my obsession with patterns within textile made me very much interested in patterns within data, and in that sense, I started with the AI, with my AI research, no, with the machine learning experimentation. And what you see now, it's a vinyl album that I put out last year. This is actually it's an analog format that actually contains completely synthetic content, and again, my artistic practice has a lot to do with hermeneutic subjects, translation, interpretation, how information is shaped by these different media, etc. And also a societal aspect. I think ultimately, especially by now, my work very much exerts a critique on the hegemonic culture related to technology and arts, and how this history is presented as linear, as there's just one, especially related to technological devices. And in this history, a lot of other voices are being silenced, let's say, or have been silenced. And in that way, I'm very interested in voice. And actually, this album contained, I mean, it was completely generated by really 3 different deep learning models. The first one generated a body of poetry that was essentially of South American origin. I trained a GPT-2, which is a deep learning model that actually generates text. So I did a selection of poetry from different countries related to the Andean region in South America. And this produced a very particular body of poetry that, let's say, that the connection line was that the artists that I selected, in which I also included myself, and Cecilia Vicuña and Jorge Eduardo Eielson, weren't not only visual artists, but they were also interested in code and poetry. And in this particular device that's called Kipu, which you will see in the next work that I will talk about. And so in a way, talking about this device was talking about the presence and the reference to an object in the history of South American art, that even so has been present for so many years, it doesn't really belong to the world art history. And I thought that was so interesting, and I also considered it was the moment that this should be talked about. So then the second part of this album, this text is actually being recited by a voice, and this voice was that of one of the poets, the one that it's not alive anymore, Jorge Eduardo Eielson. And then this, I think, is related to what we will talk about. The particularity of this voice is that it's far from perfect. It has, very characteristic prosody and, accent that you can relate it to South America, to the Peruvian coast, actually. And this was intentional. I was very interested in maintaining these sort of errors in pronunciation, what to say, because that would be appealing for us humans. Actually, when one recognizes a synthetic voice because of its perfection. So this voice, when you hear it, it sounds extremely human because it's not perfect. And the relation with error has been also a constant in my work, and before I've been working with glitch art related to visual and sounds. And then this is a part of the system that I've developed to present here in Ars Electronica. I presented in the Sound Campus 2 days ago. And this, as you see, the structure is this Kipu. This is pre-Columbian device. It is a notation system, a data storage system based on notes. And it's speculated it could have been a writing system. So far, it's only known that it's the numerical values of these notes. And again, this is an object that has been constantly referenced in South American art. So what I did is I've trained a model, so it recognizes the notes, and based on me tying the notes in the performance itself, this triggers or allows me to do live coding. So yes, maybe I can talk a bit more about this in the talk.
Thank you very much. A very unique approach of using AI. The next panelist is Leslie. I have to thank you especially for participating in this panel, because she is joining us from Mexico, where it is very, very early. But it was the only time that worked for everybody here. So thank you again for joining, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to share some images also. So my name is Louise Garcia. I'm a media and sound artist from Tijuana. And I'm part of Interspecifics, a multi-species nomad collective, an independent artistic research bureau founded in Mexico City in 2013. And our current lines of research are focused on the use of sound and artificial intelligence to understand bioelectrical and chemical signals of different living organisms and geometrical patterns, as well as forms of non-human forms of communication. So this is the collective, the full of them: Carles Tardillo, Felipe Rebolledo, Paloma Lopez, Alfredo Lozano, Emmanuel Anguiano, Maru Pebo, Nick Liebert, and myself. And we've been working on artificial intelligence for some time now. But I would like to start with this example from Microrhythms 2016, where we find it a way to translate bioelectrical signals into patterns to create a musical score that is interpreted by both the bioelectrical changes on bacteria and the light representation of those that are then translated into a musical score that is performed live and during a period of almost 2 months by the machine. The interesting aspect of this is that the machines start learning about the process of the microorganism, and by so it start creating different variations on the compositions. We're very interested on the emergence of patterns as different process of human and non-human communication. In 2017, we started the speculative communications, and this was a different approach. We started observing morphological changes by using this device. We developed a microscope that has the capability of following bacteria with mobility capacities on space and setting up a performance that is both presented by the bacteria, the artificial intelligence, and the humans as music and actors. The artificial intelligence in this case is some sort of orchestrator of the full, and it's a process of interaction and observation. In the case of Aire, version 3, we developed a system together with the World Resources Institute and NASA to use predictive data of contaminants, air pollutants in the air in 3 main cities. In this case, we work with Mexico City, Bogota, and Sao Paulo. And we use the data to create an audiovisual score that is constantly changing depending on the values. And also it's been analyzed as a level of patterns and complexity by a machine learning system. We have this visual representation where we create this sort of like a navigation around the complexity of the city, as well as the data, putting them together. I will play a little teaser of this. So this particular piece was presented in the format of a live visual performance. Actually, we presented at Mutek, Montréal this year, and also it's presented as a album that is created both with the help of the data and the artificial intelligence itself. Recurrent Morphing Radio is a 24/7 streaming platform that is created by a logical analysis of overconsumption practices that are driven by algorithms, especially analyzing the behavior of listening in streaming platforms. So we use the streaming data to create new compositions based on those processes by resampling styles by using 3 different types of systems, sample RNN, WaveNet, and jukebox, of course, to give a better quality on the sound composition. We have different techniques to analyze the style mixture and the recomposition of the tracks, and this happens real time over a long period of time. And we have a audiovisual performance version that the machine is creating also on the side of the radio representation. All the elements in the radio, including the titles of the tracks, are created by different neural networks. We are also using Markovian chains to create the structure of the way the radio is playing those tracks and creating some sort of like a panel of presentations. So the titles and the structure is also completely controlled by a machine. So I will stop here. I think there is a video of the project we're presenting right now in Ars Electronica at the end of the session, which is Codex Virtuales Genesis, that was the winner of the residency SETI by AI at Ars Electronica Future Lab. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion that we starting right now, because so I think we really have 3 panelists, 3 artists with completely different but unique approaches how to use technology and art and combine them. But my first question is more general and maybe it's more personal. So the first question is about creativity. And why is it personal? Because creativity, at least to me, seems to be a very personal phenomenon. So creative ideas, they're just born in our minds. We can't really explain where they come from. They are just suddenly in our mind. Of course, we can communicate them with others through language, through verbs, and even further develop them with others. But at the end of the day, I think it's a very personal phenomenon how creative ideas are born in our minds. So my question on you is, first of all, how do you experience your creative process? What do you think how your creativity works? And also, how do you experience your creativity with machines when you are using machines? Are you, for example, using machines more as tools so that you control them and they work for you, and you use them to reach a predefined certain goal, or let you or get you inspired by the machines and let they even create the result or the final work? I would say we keep the order we had for the presentation. So Davide, please go ahead.
Sure. Well, certainly I think it's a very interesting and mysterious topic when you talk about creativity. I think creativity is not something that just lies inside you and come out, but I think, I think in general, historically, we need this kind of external agents that trigger creativity. I think in, all sort of history of art, nature, for example, it has been one of these external agents, this like confrontation with nature that becomes a vehicle to discover new aesthetics, like new processes, and I see a little bit technology as a bit was nature for this, historical artist. This is what it is for me. So certainly it is not a tool for me or just a tool. I like to see it on one side as a collaborator, but also as a context with which you have exchanges and perhaps also context through which you can discover areas of creativity that on your own you might have not be able to discover. So I think a little bit as, again, make this analogy of like nature, how nature was, a vehicle for artists to discover something else in a way. I think for me, technology is a little bit like that. I'm interested in strange, intimate relationship with technology to discover new aesthetics, new principles, new paradigms of doing things. So, yes, certainly it is not a simple tool. I don't like to see it that way. I think it's a boring sort of use of the technology. Of course, you can use it like that. We do it every day in many different applications. But I think within the arts, these kind of dynamic exchanges with technology could really lead you, I think, to discover something truly new in a way. So that's a little bit how we see it.
Thank you.
Well, I try to take technology, I would say transversally. I don't differentiate technology as, say, computer tools or instruments separated from more traditional or even called ancestral type of devices. I put an extra effort of putting them all in the same level and taking them as such. So in that sense, it's also for me a conversation, no? A conversation with the past to the future. There is this interesting idea within Andean philosophies, is that actually time could be taken as circular, no? That the present can be assumed as the past, and this has an actual relation to the language as well, as in Quechua and especially Aymara languages. It's interesting. There are two words that can be used for the present in a temporal realm, but they refer to what is in the back in a spatial realm. So in that sense, also when I talk about technology, I constantly refer as well to this. I try not to assume it as linear, but sort of maybe jump and try to see it beyond this construction that we've been given, no? That there is like a constant innovation and one needs to advance, but also in this advancement there's a going back as well. So in that sense, yeah, it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue with technology, with different types of technology, not only artificial intelligence, but again, the way I take technology or technology related to electronics or more like computers is that it seems that it's that this type of say computers is always and now artificial intelligence. It's actually a way of how we see ourselves thinking. I mean, all of the tools that all of the models that are being developed, it's actually, in a way, they could be biased, no? Because it's how in our current zeitgeist we think that we're thinking. So in that sense, I view, especially when we work with machine learning, I view it as entities, hence that actually named the entity that created the album as Ailson. Because yes, it would be an entity that has that manifests differently in different media. So yes, it definitely it's not just a tool, but nevertheless, it's essentially a tool, as everything else could be. And maybe that's a reflection of the Anthropocene, that we basically have turned into tools everything, including nature. And I think that's also related to my artistic practice, because I'm very, very interested in indigenous thought because of this. Because there's so much talk about how to save the world, how to fight against climate change, and yet there's populations that live in perfect harmony with their environment, and these voices are rarely heard and are never taken into these solutions. And that's, for example, there has been a lot of talking on how to apply even a machine learning, artificial intelligence to save us, but these voices are completely, they're silent as well. So yeah, I think that's my relation with technology. It's a complicated one, maybe love and hate relationship. It's both a dialogue, but also a discussion.
Thank you very much. Leslie, please.
Sure. I really think the process of creativity in general, it's a sum of several lines of interconnection and understanding. I really like this idea from Neri Oxman from MIT that talks about creativity as a circular process. So you start by gathering information from nature on a more scientific basis, understanding what's outside on the phenomena process. And then you send that process, that knowledge into creating utility with engineering. And that's also a creative process. Engineering has their own rules of creativity. Then that you have the technology created by engineering, you send that process into design and you create behavior. And then that behavior is turned into a conscious process by the arts domain. So if you think in that way, we are always running on this circle in different directions, because it's not just in one way, you can interconnect in different ways. So for me, the process of creation is this actual process of gathering knowledge, gathering information, understand what I have, and then turn that into an experience. And the relation with machines is very similar also, because I see the machine as an agent that has its own capabilities and it has its own understanding of the physical environment and the physical phenomena. And I try to create a sort of relation with that agent in order that we can interconnect ourselves and start creating our own processes. So in one side is the understanding of the technological aspect as it is, and their own, lines and qualities and specifications, and then try to put myself inside this understanding to create a narrative together. So I also agree on this sense with Paola, because I see that for me as a Mexican artist, I try to combine these two worlds of technology, the Western technology that is embedded in my education, of course, but also the traditional ancestral technologies that are part of the vision of my territory. And in that sense, for us, everything has a sort of intelligence. Everything has a way of speaking, and we are trying to give an interface for those other forms of expression.
Thank you very much. It brings me to the next question that is also part of the title of this panel, which is about human intention. I mean, human intention in your works, in all of you, is very, very strong. So it is, we can see this. This is your work, and AI, even as a counterpart, it's just helping you to to release the work. But nonetheless, I think the question is very relevant, because we have some technological limitations, how to communicate with AI, and how to share our intention, or to realize our intention with AI. We have technological issues, first of all, because non-explainable AI and all these things. But on the other hand, it is also the problem of autonomy, because if you have an autonomous system, so of course, based on the definition of autonomy, it's not very easy to control the system if it is autonomous. But we will talk about autonomy a bit later. But first of all, my question is about, so generally, not, please don't think about your particular works, but generally about AI and art. What do you think, how do you see intention in the context of AI-based art? Because, theoretically or technically, it is possible just to press a button and many AI models are able to generate new text for you, new images for you, music for you. And very often, these images or this data are not really distinguishable from the ones that a human have generated or created. And so what do you think about can a result have a meaning if it is just created by pressing a button? Or is the meaning somewhere in the data set? I know these are philosophical questions, but actually these questions are already real because we have this kind of artworks. There are artists who create just a model, and everything from this model is the artwork. So it is not about the person who pressed the button. It is actually about the person who created the model. So it is an endless generator of artwork. So I was wondering, how do you see the importance of intention in the context of art and AI?
Well, I think in general, like art, it's never a sort of monodirectional thing. It's not that you create something and then that's just it. I mean, there is also an exchange to people that perceive what you have created, and there is a sort of loop, and it's not about creating one thing. Perhaps ideas are developed over a very long time of these kind of exchanges. So, of course, the technology is there for this, perhaps, machine to continuously be able to spit out things that might be indistinguishable maybe from human-made things. But ultimately, I think the purpose of why exactly that thing has been spitted out and how do we relate to that thing, I think is really crucial to this question. It's not so much only about the possibilities, the potential. I think ultimately we should focus a lot in judging what we receive as an audience from this. And if we are as equally engaged, if there is something strong, I mean, I don't have many problems in really blurring the line between human and machine in that sense, but ultimately this shouldn't be judged on what is possible to do. I think we should, judge by how this stuff really make us feel. How is it enriching us, how is this experience really changing my life in a way? So I think for me, experiencing art is something that has a profound effect, on my life. I mean, besides making art, but also in generally experiencing other people's art and so on. And this happens with certain things and not with other things. Certain paintings and not with other paintings. But the technology behind that painting is exactly the same. It's a brush. Certain things touch me. So I think these things are really in the subtleties. These are very new languages, and it will take, I think, a little while to calibrate them in a way that are going to touch us profoundly. I think that's, and to me, that's a little bit the goal ultimately. All right, you can have a model, but ultimately, depending on what you feed to this model, what you let him learn, it will impact, the output. And I think it's based on this output and how it makes us feel. You will go back. It's a process. So, of course, I'm excited. I am, very much a technology nerd. I'm excited about the potential of things, what is possible to do. But ultimately, at the same time, when you're talking about art and how I perceive art and how it makes me feel, it's a bit less about, what is possible to do. It's ultimately what I get, and sometimes how it has been made, it's not necessarily so relevant anymore. So I think that going back to this analogy of the painting, you see two paintings. One changed your life, the other one, not really. The technology behind it is the same, the strategy might be the same, but there is something else that, So I think that it's important in a way to always judge ultimately this feedback of how we relate to whatever has been created by a human, by a machine, or by the two collaborating together to some extent. I think for me that's the crucial part of it.
It's a wonderful perspective, actually. So actually the receiver of the art, so not how it is generated. Thank you.
I would like to talk about the specific case of the IELTS models, because it's what you refer to. It's actually a creation of models that generate artworks, in this case, spoken word poetry. And it was very interesting, the fact how errors or let's say, phrases that could be taken as disruption, say in a proper text in prose, in the case of poetry, were actually a sign of creativity, or could be taken as such, no? In the sense that, of course, the realm of poetry allows more experimentation. So let's say that the autonomy or the supposedly autonomy of the system did, for me, it became evident that it manifested through these, in between commas, errors, no, and this sort of imperfection. Say, if a word repeated in the context of poetry, that could be a stylistic property of poetry, no. So of course, and I say that it's again related to the previous question of creativity. There's this sort of confrontation or balancing of forces. Say, when you're training a model, depending on the learning rate that you put, the number that you put, it's interesting because that number is always dependent on the human. I mean, one needs to control this hyperparameter every time, and that's very much based in trial and error. So even if the whole system is apparently independent, in that such important parameter, we're always part of the equation, let's say. And in that sense, what we feel it's right in the learning rate, finally, the output that we, even if we don't think we're looking for a specific output, we always are. And maybe this is more related to the discussion. But again, with this, I want to question like how much, I mean, what way they're really autonomous, or they're, even if they end up, these systems, in the case of deep learning models, end up having an output that sometimes it's so far away from what we were looking for or expecting. There's still, we're part of this, so they're never fully autonomous. So.
You have a very strong social and historical context in your work, and you just mentioned you have try and error by changing, modifying parameters by the system to reach or to fulfill your intentions in the system. And so this is also a very interesting perspective of how we can actually communicate with the AI, because it is of course not a direct communication with the AI, but so in other words, you accept that it is not possible to directly, to use the language to communicate with the AI, or to use human terms to communicate with the AI, but it is possible to change the system itself by changing parameters, and so you can bring your intention into the system. So this is another. So it means in your case, it is not about who or when the AI is actually generating something. It is about how the AI is built. So
yes,
this is
yes.
where the intention actually is. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Leslie, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I think for me it has this relation with some very old theories from cybernetics, especially second order cybernetics, which is that we cannot control anything. Everything is in a level of influence. So in this sense, I believe that our intention is to influence those systems, to get them to work in a specific way and to get them to create specific results. But for me, the important question is, what's the influence on the human level? What forces are influencing us to get this series of actions in motion so we can create these artworks together with the machines? And in that sense, I think one answer for this specific question is the theories from Carlos Varela and from Varela and Maturana, which is the autopoietic capabilities of the systems. So in this sense, we together, the material, the living, the human, and the machine are creating this sort of interrelation, and we are gathering information from some sort of field of possibilities that quantum physics is making very clear for us that is there and is interconnected. So I really like these aspects of relation in interconnection that creates the intention in the human, but also the intention in the machine. So I would say that the ontology of these relations is what really makes interesting in today's art what is going on, because we're just not experiencing that we as humans are modifying phenomena, but also the phenomena is defining us as communities. Sorry. And as creators and as spectators of these physical enactions that are happening. So I think it's a very interesting chain of relations, and I think in that sense the machine is also creating in us a specific intention. We are going back and forward in a very complex and intricate communication process. And this is what is actually today's way of understanding artificial intelligence from a more, post-humanistic perspective. Is the machine also alive? Is our intention putting this machine in a more epistemical situation where the machine is no longer just an extension of us, but also is representing a new level of our own capabilities?
Thank you. I can remember in your project, Codex Virtualis, we also have been talking about the concept of exploration instead of creation. So it means maybe we can, this is another possibility how to interpret what we do with AI. So of course we use creation as a task to train the AI and to use it as a way to communication with AI. But actually what happens in background is that we explore new possibilities of the data. And at the end of the day, it is the human artist who decides what to use, what to embed in the final work or not. And this is also a way how to describe AI creativity, not as creation, but as exploration tool, we have to say in that case. So it is not something autonomous, it's just a very powerful tool to give us new potential, new creative potential of something. And then at the end of the day, we can as artists decide what to use or what not. And I think this aspect was also very good represented in your work in Codex Virtualis. So the next question, we already have been talking about this actually. It was, of course, about autonomy of AI. And to simplify it, or to compare it with other existing technologies, there are a variety of tools that we can use to create artistic data or new data, like Photoshop for images, or Maximus B for audio, Logic Pro for audio processing, all these tools. But always when we are using these tools, we actually have a quite good understanding of what is happening in background. We know how algorithm works, and we know how to manipulate the parameter in a quite good way. That we know, for example, if I apply a low-pass filter to my audio signal, I have a quite good understanding of how to change the parameter of the filter to create a certain result. But when it comes to AI, I don't think that we have that anymore. So we can, as you mentioned before, of course, we have always a possibility to find the right parameters by some try and error. But at the end of the day, it is not really possible if you have a sufficient complex AI system to predict what the reaction of the AI will be by changing some parameters in the system, or by changing your input, or even training data. Not even about that you can be sure if you change your training data, even add some biases in the training data intentionally to get a certain result. You can't really know what the result will be. And I mean, it is, maybe we can say it is even good, because AI acts like an autonomous agent, and we can really see it as counterpart, and we can get us inspired by this technology, and explore new possibilities, as we were talking before. But on the other hand, maybe if it comes to artworks, if it comes to certain particular ideas, concepts of artworks, maybe this is not sufficient anymore, because if you have a system, if you have a tool that doesn't follow your rules, how can you be certain, for example, I mean, I'm talking about a very simple question. How can you be certain how long time you need to create the final results? Because, of course, if the AI accidentally gives you the right result, you could be finished in 1 day or even in 1 hour. But otherwise, maybe you have to try. So the question is, I think it is a problem actually in the practical life. But on the other hand, maybe for the creativity itself, it's not bad to have an autonomous system that can even surprise you, right?
But I think making art, it's really not so much about finding solutions, but rather more about creating problems.
Yes.
So to be honest, I think I am pretty good at creating problems. I love to somehow crawl into these problems that I create. It's not only about solving them. I have to say that I don't fully agree with you. You have this vision that it's either black or white. It's either autonomous or not autonomous. It's what happened before AI somehow, something that it's controlled, and then that it's completely autonomous. I think there's many different shades of gray in between, using machine learning strategies, but using many different other strategies, still you can create systems that have a great deal of autonomy. Or you could use AI systems that have complete autonomy, be embedded to control only a small portion of a wider system on which, for example, you have a very much great deal of control. So when in my work, we develop complex systems, and different parts of these systems might have different degree of autonomy. And depending, for example, well, let's maybe make something a bit more practical. There's a system to produce music, to play music and compose music. The system is quite elaborate, but you can use the system in different way. So sometimes I can be a performer, a composer, or sometimes I can almost be just almost a spectator in a way. There's this different level. So I am very intrigued by autonomy. I am also very intrigued by control. I like this idea of being surprised by what a system is providing back, but also I like the idea of being in control of that. And I think this fine calibration, it's ultimately really, really crucial again. Like I think, simulation, it's another important, for example, physics, simulations is something we use a lot, in our work. When you think about a low-pass filter, right, of course, low-pass filter, you know what that does. But how exactly you are animating this parameter? Like, what are the rules that govern how this parameter move, and when are those rules implemented? So suddenly you have systems that are developed to control other systems. That's, for example, what we do. We develop systems with maybe hundreds of parameters. And then we have another systems that only modulate parameters. And so the kind of relationships you can create are very articulated, can lead to an incredibly surprising and autonomous behaviors. not necessarily without the use of AI, or let's say not necessarily giving up everything. So again, here I'm maybe somehow complicating this conversation in the sense that I don't think it's autonomy good or bad, or with AI yes or no. I think it depends the kind of systems, and when you develop complexity, then I think in a way or another you need to have a certain degree of control, because otherwise it's a bit chaotic for me, and ultimately I find it boring as an artist if I don't have a bit of agency into what I'm doing.
I also think that that one needs to be critical with the idea of taking these, especially AI systems, as autonomous, because that could also, let's say, take the role of the human in designing them and, as I say, like controlling these parameters. Now, because and I think this could be part of what we will talk about bias. So, of course, if we assume as these completely independent systems free from human input and thoughts and opinions, etc., then there could be a risk. So that's why I emphasize that I follow his line of thought, that we can't talk about certain is 100% autonomous or not, but it's a degree of autonomy that we can reach, but it's never fully autonomous, these systems, no? And also the control, we can exert a certain amount of control, maybe almost 100%, but never fully. So, and I think this is also related to creativity. It's in this conflict, in this never being fully able to achieve something that these new interesting systems and experiences emerge.
I was thinking on this idea that focused to work with artificial intelligence. There was the problem of the observer during experimentation, which is that everything that we observe, we are conditioning. So the results are always predetermined by the one that is observing the process, and the one that is enacting the experiment. And in that sense, I like this idea from Andrew Pickering that science is a performance, but also the action of art is performative in general. So when you have these machines taking over the observer, the human observer, then you have this question that is the machine capable of interfere on the process of the experiment itself? And when that question is positive, then we can say that system is completely autonomous. But until this point, we have not observed that kind of behavior arises over these processes. It is still being, dependent on the human determinations, on the way the human is programming, on the way the human is determining this process of relations in between, yes, the fine-tuning of parameters, but also the conditions, the setup, and the definition in which these machines are being, put in action. And I don't know, for us, it's also been interesting to see the kinds of interfaces we can create in between the systems and other kind of phenomena. So for us, it's like using the machines in that sense to bring phenomena that is intangible or more difficult to tackle with our senses alive by these machines. So these systems are for us interfaces that interconnect the more subtle phenomena happen outside and putting those forces into a way that is graspable for the human consciousness and perception. So it's always a process of interrelations, not only with the human aspect, but also with the materiality and the phenomena of other kinds of enactions outside the human as well.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, when we are talking about parameters, so actually, in a system where you can explain what the contribution of a parameter is to the result, even I'm not talking about numbers, but you know what this function, this algorithm does, this is still explainable. But when it comes to AI, the only function we can explain is, of course, how the matrix multiplications in background are working, and how what function we have in our neurons, and how the BIOS is calculated, all this elementary stuff. But it is not possible to, for example, to say what the contribution of one weight is to a final result, and the contribution of this weight can be even different now and with another input data. So it is always different, and this is my point. The point is, of course, a chaotic system or a very, very complex system is also not really easy to, in a chaotic system is also not easy to say what the contribution of one parameter is. It's difficult, but somehow you can get more close to the contribution of this parameter of this function. But in a neural network, it is actually not possible, and it's, the problem is because it is not such a thing like a contribution of a single neuron to the result, but we always have patterns of activation. So it's always about multiple neurons activating together or not together. So this is the difference between the parameters that are explainable or what I meant. But I totally agree with you. Of course, I mean, the explainability of AI is something else, so this is another topic. But how AI systems act anonymously, not anonymous, like in an autonomous way, could also be related to the fact that they are not explainable, of course. Because if we knew what happens in background, what happens in the system, we could also, maybe we could predict what the system will do. And in that case, it would be much easier, to change the parameters beforehand. So my next question is, considering that the AI systems are not really controllable or explainable, can we, now I'm going back actually, can we say they are autonomous, or even maybe, because we know they are able to come to a result, to the output without our intervention. We know that. But still, is it safe to say they act anonymously just because they can generate results without our actions?
Well, I think they act according to a model that has certain rules. I mean, there are certain objectives. So it really depends, again, where is the line between talking about this at a very abstract level, what it is possible, and on very specific scenarios where this happens, because not necessarily you need to understand. There are, scenarios that perhaps this unpredictability it is, and again, we could go, I think, back to that famous low-pass filter, and you might develop a model that will modulate, an AI model just to modulate that low-pass filter during a concert, for example, So you know exactly what it will do. It will just change one parameter, but you don't know exactly how it will do it, but still it would be autonomous, but somehow quite predictable in the sense you're associating it to, I think, a very simple thing. So I think it depends, when you talk about an AI system producing music on its own, like such very complex task, it's one thing. An AI system controlling a much simpler task than, so what I'm saying about this kind of balance of autonomy, I mean also using these AI strategies, machine learning strategies, for certain very specific part of, slightly bigger apparatus, slightly bigger machine. It comes to mind your work, for example, in which these strategies are used along with other strategies. I mean, I think ultimately this idea of autonomy, yes, is there, but also is based on a model, and I think, I don't know exactly if you can call it complete, total autonomy. I think that is still within the frame of what ultimately that system has been programmed to do.
Yes, or maybe it's it's autonomous not only up to a certain point, but if we view the model on a certain level, maybe that level is autonomous. But as Leslie correctly was explaining, there's all of these beyond the hyperparameters that I was referring to. I chose it because it was a really interesting specific example on how also even in our fine-tuning of these hyperparameter, there's a certain randomicity that we need to control as well, maybe because of taste. It could be if we're doing an artwork. So again, yes, maybe to a certain level, it is autonomous, but at the same time, there's all of these other levels in which it is not. And human intention is very present. So again, but I think that's what it's captivating, at least for me, within the art realm. It's in this, in this interplay of forces, let's say, between control and autonomy of this one system, say me, if I'm going to take, and then, sort of confronted with this other system that, in a way, in the case at least of my work, I wanted to have a certain kind of output, but not something that I can really predict. And I think, at least in the poems, that was let's say, the surprise, because of this balance in between these two forces, allowed this to be perceived as a creative machine, no?
I think I'm going to try to answer this from the perspective of this project Codex Virtualis, because in this sense we're trying to understand the human reality, the natural reality, as an ecosystemic reality that is ruled by these symbiotic relations that are being in play by different kinds of agents. And in the same way, we are seeing the process in these artificial intelligence systems and machine learning and cellular automatas and all the algorithms that we're using to create this piece. We see them as an ecosystem of algorithms, and we see them as systems that are cooperating in between them. So there is not autonomy of one algorithm, but there is an interrelationship of algorithms that play together to create a complexity that goes closer to what we perceive as nature. So that's like I think the breakthrough information we were exposed during this process of construction. And for us, it was actually beautiful to think that machines and algorithms, they also need to cooperate in order to exist. So I think I don't believe in autonomy as itself, either in nature or in technology. I think it's always an interplay.
Thank you very much.
There's, I think, something else that somehow sparked an idea from what she said, but I think in a way also as artists, somehow you tend to have a very personal way of doing things. I think ultimately that's what leads of different artists producing different art in a way. It's like developing a personal way of expressing yourself. So I think this idea of an interplay between all of these bits of technology that are available today, or perhaps that you can develop, and I think the more of this interplay and the more personal this interplay are, then the more personal ultimately what you do is and how it is different from someone else. You know, if you take a model that someone has developed and then everybody just use that model, then they will produce things that are very, very similar. I mean, this a little bit, for example, has been, I think, the problem with what has been done with AI in this sort of initial excitement bubble, in a way. So there is an algorithm, a certain model. Oh, that's very interesting, and then everybody starts using that. And of course, it comes interesting to us because it's something new. We are excited by the potential. But then actually, you look at these things, and they all look very much the same. So you start to question a little bit, okay, but as an artist, you know, I mean, you might explain me that this is actually very profound and very life-changing, but actually you're making something that looks very similar to what this other person has been making. So I think our role, as artists, is to even come up with like creative, subversive, strange ways of using this technology, of combining different bits, creating interplays that become. And then, as I was saying before, then when you measure things on how people receives these, then I think it's the only way that people can actually be quite happy and excited about what they receive, because there's a variety, there's very personal, different approaches to this. So it is, I think, for me, really crucial. It's a crucial aspect of what I do, developing my own tools in very unusual ways. But I think it's also how I see this whole conversation going and developing over the next years. How are you actually going to use that model beside what that model does? How are you actually, what are you going to do with it?
Thank you very much. There are so many questions actually we could discuss today, but there are also questions from the audience, from online audience, and you have also possibility to ask. And I would maybe begin with a question from the audience, but please keep your answers maybe under 2 minutes, because so that we can answer more questions. So the first question, I think we have already answered that. Do we always need human intention to create art? Who wants to answer that?
Probably, I think you might need this human intention, maybe, I guess. It's a strange, actually difficult question, but I think you do need, human intention. I think if you're creating art for people, I think it's nice to have that human intention, I think.
I can remember as we talked before together, because I really want to also add this point here about randomness, but it's a huge discussion, so please don't start with that. But the only thing is, because we also have intention can also be in randomness, because if randomness as a concept, so I think it's also related to this question that the intention can be at different levels and can be done in completely different ways, as you said before, as artists. So you can use, and also your work is a very good example of how to put intention in completely different ways. You had a question, I think?
Yeah. I have a little bit different perspective, like looking from chess and Go, where artificial intelligence has taken over the dominance in playing. I mean, they're better than humans now. Could the same thing happen to art? The surprising thing was with Go, that as the machine won against the best players in the world, what the commentators, the experts says, we were surprised how creative the machine was playing. So they found solutions and ideas that humans never would have come up with. So that is one thing. The other is the frame, the frame in which it happens. That's right. So there's always an open space where humans can do anything that machines can't do. I agree with that. But there are frames, like you want to have concert music for a bar, or for a film, some playing music, some nice pictures on the wall. I can imagine that easily AI creates such paintings or such music that everybody prefers against human-painted pictures, or who don't care. The field in which you are really now experienced and playing with AI, I guess, is a very special one. So maybe you should think a little bit about what happens on the lower levels of artistic activities with AI.
But I don't quite think, for example, let's say that there's always this interplay between the artist and the art critic, for example. You know, the art critic that knows things. However, the art critic, he knows all of these things. It's not necessarily the good artist. The good artist is also the artist that actually might not know things. For example, you might talk to, like, you know, someone that really studied how the brain reacts to colors, for example, and there are very deep scientific studies, and this person might have really understand how a color makes you feel, then why he is not right now the greatest artist of today? Because he would have unlocked exactly how he wants to communicate to you. And because I think this is a bit more of a complex problem in the end. There's so many interplay of why you are moved by a piece of art, you know. And that's a little bit the tricky part. It's not just making images that they look similar to what it has been done before. And I think we are, because when you look at an image, you're influenced by the context, what's behind that image, how it has been generated. So I don't know how I would feel if I have an image that perhaps aesthetically pleasing, but maybe doesn't have a story behind that intrigues me as an art collector to have it in my house and actually contemplate. So yes, you can create nice images training an algorithm. You know, you train an algorithm on some of my work and you can then spit similar images somehow continuously. But I don't know if that's really where we should go. I don't find it that interesting, that area. I don't know.
Yeah, it ultimately relates to what art is, and the context in which these artworks or the product is presented. And by product, I mean, like, when one thinks about the example of chess, I mean, that's, as you were saying, that's, you need to solve a problem, you need to find a strategy, and art is not necessarily about that. So it could happen, but again, it happens in one context. What societies wanting what? So maybe it could get to a point in which AI makes art that is more interesting. But yes, of course, what does it say about the society or the group of people that are finding these artworks more interesting? This is quite it could be quite a long discussion, because it has to do a lot with aesthetics as well, no? With the concept or with whatever art is, and who does define what art is, what is good art. If we're, of course, we're thinking from mimesis or this kind of art that it reflects, let's say, like more landscape art, yeah, and probably AI would surpass us humans. But is this the only type of art that is of value? No. So yeah. No.
I think also, sorry, I'm just super brief, but I think something as well to reflect is like, what are machines good at? What are humans good at? And I think then you have a sort of efficient interplay. Rather, it would be a quite wasteful, I think, approach to simply take something that we're actually pretty good at and really waste all of these resources to replicate that, where maybe, we could use it to just, complement what we're not that good at.
Yeah, and I will also add that, as Paola was saying, I was not surprised with this Go play or the chess thing, because at the end, you are solving a task. So you are saying the machine, this is the conditions, and you have to create a better way of solving this problem inside these conditions. So at the end, chess and Go itself, they have their own properties as a sort of algorithm. So for a machine, it's really good to solve algorithms. So it's not a surprise to have these results in that sense. In the other hand, on the artistic aspect, you have the subjectivity of the artist embedded in the artwork. And does this machine has subjectivity? We have to start asking those questions before we ask if machines can create art themselves. And that's something we are not there yet. It's going to take some time to see this kind of emergency. But of course, it's possible that this happens. You have the tortoises of Walter Gray performing complex neural activity with only one LED and one sensor. And that's like a very old predecessor of this kind of actions that artificial intelligence is starting to have today. But you cannot replace the individuality and the subjectivity of the human artist as ways of expression. Because of course, as Paola was saying also, there is also the aspect of the aesthetics and the breakthrough art in the history of the art, human art, is not always the things that humans like the most. Usually takes a long time for societies to understand artworks, and usually it's very complicated process. When something like, you know, classical music gets all over the place and becomes mainstream music, it's been almost 300 years after the creation of those pieces. So we have a lot of time for that to happen.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we are not able to answer any more questions. And because we only have 2 minutes, the iLab conference will continue in 30 minutes again. If you are on Swapcard, just change over to the next session, AI meets civil society. I appreciate everyone's here sharing opinions with others. Thank you again to Ars Electronica Festival, Mutek Festival for making this panel possible. As I mentioned before, after this panel, we will show you some examples from the artists joining the panel, and please check out everyone's work on internet, online, and thank you again for watching. Bye.
La artista Paola Torres, Núñez del Prado, ha trabajado con sonido y textiles desde el 2007. Y diseñando interfaces textiles que emergieron de la galería de arte para acabar como parte de performances sonoras. Es así que entre las voces que cantan desde los tejidos he nacido yo, Tyson, y en la inteligencia artificial que compone y recita poemas, y que ahora presento mi primer álbum poemario llamado El tiempo del hombre. Ciencia. Ciencia oye al sol del cielo y a todo de ciencia. Aunque se me abandona, lo más aprecio un cielo es más tu ciencia.